Ave Maris Stella, Dei Mater.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I'm a priest of Legions of Christ and I teach theology. This is a podcast on the Sacramentals Production Network at sqpn.com. I want to start out today with a quick announcement. Somehow, a few of these ones, when I recorded them, there was an issue of breaking in and out, including yesterday and today. Yesterday, so day 23, January, was re-recorded first thing in the morning and for my morning on the West Coast. And so if you skip that one because you downloaded it early and it seemed choppy and things like that, there is a replacement. So you can go back and listen to it. It is actually there without the breaking up. I don't know what happened with the audio recording. I checked them a little bit, but I guess I didn't check it good enough. It's my fault. Sorry. That was a little error. I just made that mistake. And this one I'm re-recording on the 23rd as well. So I can record it, upload it tonight, and you'll have it for day 24 tomorrow. So today we're on day 24, as noted. We're covering Sacramentals 77 to 82, on visions, the other rites of marriage and sacramentals. So we're in chapter 3, other sacramentals, other sacraments and sacramentals. If you want to follow along, the read plan, etc., more details, sqpn.com/Vatican. We're going to conclude this chapter today, and then we're going to move on to the breviary and things like that. So yesterday we were talking about welcoming and baptizing other sacraments like confirmation, confession, ordination. Today we're going to talk about marriage and sacramentals as opposed to sacraments. They're the rites for sacramentals. There's a lot of paragraphs, but it's pretty short and direct. So it's not going to be super long, even though it seems like there's a lot when you just look at the numbers. So paragraph 77 is on revising the marriage rite. It says, the marriage rite now found in the Roman rituals to be revised and enriched in such a way that the grace of the sacrament is more clearly signified and the duties of the spouses are taught. If any regions are wont to use other praiseworthy customs and ceremonies when celebrating the sacrament of matrimony, the Sacred Synod earnestly desires that these by all means be retained. Moreover, the competent territorial ecclesiastical authority mentioned in Article 22.2 of this Constitution is free to draw up their own right suited for the usage of place and people, according to the provisions of Article 63. But the right must always conform to the law that the priest assisting the marriage must ask for and obtain the consent of the contracting parties. Those of you who are reading along with a printed version of the online version might have said, hey, wait a second, he didn't say exactly what the text said. Yes, I'm pretty sure there's a typo in English. The English online says Article 22, 25 of this Constitution, 2252. But if you go to other ones, it's 22, and then it's like a paragraph symbol, looks kind of like a number 5, but like kind of those two S's paragraph symbol for that. And that makes a lot more sense. Paragraph 50, Article 52 does not make any sense here. Article 22.2 is talking about how like the local Bishops' Conference, like the USCCB, is delegated with that authority, and that's a good thing. That's contextually makes sense. And then Article 63 is about the vernacular right. So it's super important here because the couple needs to understand what they're saying because they're conferring the sacrament of marriage on each other. So that's the idea. And the idea here is we want couples to understand marriage. We want them to embrace it. We want them to live it fully. It's not like a second class thing, like, oh, the first class is the priest and second class is these. No, like this is a vocation. This is a beautiful vocation. And there's sacrifice in it and all the things that go along with marriage. And then it talks about regional variation, right? So there are differences by country or by different cultures, and that's an important thing to include in here when we're talking about marriage. So, for example, in the Philippines, they tend to use a rope around the two couples to indicate, hey, we're joined in marriage. And things like that. And then you also have in other countries, you have other things. You might have like a blessing that's part of the engagement. That's a mandatory part. You have to go to a priest to get a blessing at that point. Still a good thing to do if you're not, but it's not a required mandatory thing here in our culture. And you may have things where there's elders of the community involved or other things, right? But obviously here you have to have the deacon or the priest be the final witness because they're the ones who are the official witnesses in the name of the church. So paragraph 78 is about revising marriage rites further on. It says, matrimony is normally to be celebrated within the Mass, after the reading and the Gospel and the homily, and before the prayers of the faithful. The prayer of the bride, duly amended to remind both spouses of their equal obligation to remain faithful to each other, may be said in the mother tongue. But if the sacrament of matrimony is celebrated apart from Mass, the epistle and the gospel from the nuptial Mass to be read at the beginning of the rite, and the blessings should always be given to the spouses. So there we go. That's the whole number, right? That idea of connecting to the other sacraments, putting in the middle. Most of the kind of additional rites, we're going to talk about consecration of virgins, religious vows, and then even ordination. Other things are put in the middle now. A lot of times before Vatican II, they're put at the beginning of Mass or almost before Mass. I know the one extraordinary form marriage I went to before I entered the seminary was like that, and that's fine. But I think the putting in the middle better connects it to the sacrament of the Eucharist, to the other sacraments or sacramentals. And also here, you want to do the readings even if you're outside of Mass. So if you're doing a wedding outside of Mass, you still do the readings. Because it's important to have that Christian aspect of Mass, not the Christian aspect of marriage, not just, hey, the two of us are getting married like at a courthouse or something. And then finally, the words, the equality, right? So marriage is a union of equals. As much as possible, they're equally responsible for not cheating. They're equally responsible for, caring for each other, things like that. And so the rites have emphasized this equality, right? If you look at the vows today, the things are the same except for the names are swapped and the words husband and wife are swapped. I, John, take you, Jane, to be my wife, and I, Jane, take you, John, to be my husband. Exactly. And then the rest of it, until death do us part, and all those things that those of you who are married probably remember. If not, it's good to go over those once a year and kind of renew them, even if it's just in your living room or something, to remind each other of that beautiful gift you're giving to each other. So moving on, paragraph 79 moves to the sacramentals, right? These marriage is a sacrament, but these are the sacramentals. They're generally just blessings or other things that are important, but not the level of a sacrament. So let's read the number. The sacramentals are to undergo a revision, which takes into account their primary purpose of enabling the faithful to participate intelligently, actively, and easily. The circumstances of our own days must be considered. When rituals are revised, as laid down in Article 63, new sacramentals may be added as the need of these becomes apparent. Reserved blessings shall be very few. Reservation shall be in favor of bishops and ordinaries. Let provision be made that some sacramentals, at least in special circumstances and at the discretion of the ordinary, may be administered by qualified laypersons. Right? So a few days ago, we talked about sacramentals. We covered those and things like that, right? Not sacraments, but important blessings and things like that. The idea of 63, putting them into vernacular. And then allowing priests to do most. And we aren't going to do, there are reserved blessings, reserved sacramentals that only the bishop can bless, but those should be very few and far between. And the term ordinary here just means somebody who has the authority in some way equivalent to a bishop. Like a priest has to have authority over most lay people in most circumstances. Like I can take a job in a seminary and my boss can be a lay person as teaching, but as far as my ministerial, as far as providing the sacraments, my boss needs to be a priest or bishop. And an ordinary is like a bishop or somebody who has that kind of level of authority. Most diocesan priests is just a bishop. For us religious, it's our provincial, or as my community calls it, territorial director, which is the same as provincial, but we just use a different term and things like that. And then finally, it's just having some blessings for lay people. So paragraph 80 is about the consecration of virgins, which is a rite that is being brought back, a kind of order that's being brought back, and religious vows and kind of unifying religious vows with poverty, chastity, and obedience. So let's read it. The rite of the consecration of virgins at present found in the Roman Pontifical is to be revised. Moreover, a rite of religious profession and renewal of vows shall be drawn up in order to achieve greater unity, sobriety, and dignity. Apart from exceptions in particular law, this rite should be adopted by those who make the profession or renewal of vows within the Mass. Religious profession should preferably be made within the Mass. So that idea of consecrated virgins, it had almost completely fallen out, even though it existed in principle before Vatican II. We had a revival. It's still relatively small. I think in the US it's a few hundred, like 100-200 kind of range. There may be more. I'm not an expert on that. And there's consecrated widows as well, which fall in the same thing. Like if your husband dies or abandons you or something like that, that can be the case. And then, things like that. And then revising these obviously based on other principles. And then I talk about religious vows. There is a unity, right? Raw vow, poverty, chastity, and obedience. There are 3 public vows. A lot of communities have a private vow or 2 afterwards that are unique. Often those are prayed in the sacristy after Mass, not in the middle of Mass with the public vows. I know that's how we do it in our community. And they have a general gist to them, but each community then adapts it, right? We we say, well, we're going to live these vows in accord with the Constitution of the Legionaries of Christ. That's my community, right? And then we invoke all our patrons to help us out to live those. So those are the kind of things that do vary community to community, but the general gist of the rite is the same. And obviously we're putting in Mass the same point as marriage after the homily, so that we unite it with the Mass, with the sacrifice there, our sacrifice of our lives in our vows. Finally, paragraphs 81 and 82 we'll cover together, talking about revising funeral rites. 81. The rite for the burial of the dead should express more clearly the paschal character of Christian death and to correspond more closely to the circumstances and traditions found in various regions. This holds good also for the liturgical color to be used. 82. The rite for the burial of infants is to be revised, and a special Mass for the occasion should be provided. So this is just, hey, we want to have realism about death. There's been different times in the church where I think there's been an overemphasis in either direction, where it's all about judgment, all about death. Death is all negative. Or every single person who vaguely went to Mass occasionally is canonized and, a saint in heaven automatically perfect. And I think both those are unrealistic. A realistic thing is that most of us who are listening to this podcast will probably spend some time in purgatory when we die. If, I don't know, I get run over by a car tomorrow, I'm guessing I'm going to purgatory for a bit. I try my best, but I'm not perfect. And things like that. So, and then local variation, right? So there can be things put in the grave with the person that are kind of, offerings to, in honor of them. There are certain traditions, like, for example, priests are often buried in liturgical garb and things like that. And such. And then the color, beforehand it was almost always black. Now it can be black, violet / purple, or white. For the funeral, it's more often violet / purple or white, because black not being required, most parishes don't have black vestments anymore, from what I know. And then the last one about the importance of when infants, little children, miscarried babies die, it's really tough on couples, and it's really important to help them out at that tough time. So thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. I do this podcast on a volunteer basis. I'm not paid, and my local community relies on donations to pay our bills. And if you want to support my community, you can go to patreon.com/frmatthewlc. I go by that all over the internet, frmatthewlc. There's also a link to a one-time donation on my own site, frmatthewlc.com. It's using a service called Acceptiva, and it ends up just being acceptiva.com, and then almost just gobbledygook it looks like, but you can link straight from my site to it. And you can also donate to Patreon or SQPN in other ways at sqpn.com/give, and that will support StarQuest. At the end of this document, so in a week and a half or 2 weeks, I'm going to do a Q&A episode for patrons. Now, everybody will be able to hear it eventually, but what I'll do is probably a day or two before I finish the document, I'll upload a kind of open post on the Patreon for SQPN and for my own, FR Matthew LC. And anybody can ask questions there, and then I'll answer all the questions put up on this Patreon in an episode, upload that episode to Patreon for, probably a week or two beforehand, and then up there for everybody else later on. So if you want to ask questions, please join Patreon, because it's going to be a great way to support, because then your regular monthly donations help the community or help StarQuest in producing all the different podcasts StarQuest produces. I'm a big fan of some of the other ones, like Jimmy and the Mysterious World as well. So tomorrow we're going to continue with Sacrosanct Pachilla. We're going to do a new paragraph on the breviary or liturgy, the hours, divine office, all three meaning the same thing. We're going to start with paragraphs 83 to 88. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. Go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, and Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X for more information on the podcast, playlists, individual documents, or reading plan, etc.